guys, it's me, Michaela Marie, and I'm back with another video. And I'm kind of excited because it's been a little while. I was fighting to get on this camera, but it took me this long. Anyways, I have missed you all, and I hope you missed me too. So I have a word for y'all today. And so I was reading a Bible stories for kids to my son before bed one night, and we were reading about Joseph and his dream and his whole story, right? And so I sat down and tried to record a word for you all whenever I had read that story, and it's been sitting in my camera somewhere, never posted, obviously. So I was watching it again on TV, like on YouTube. They had like an animated version of the story. So I was watching that with my son today, and every time like I read it or see it, like it it just does something to my soul. And so I know that God is, speaking, and so it was just so good to me, and I wanted to share it with you all. So hopefully it blesses y'all the way it blessed me. So if you do or you don't know the story of Joseph, I'm just going to give a quick rundown, and then I'm going to get into the word that he dropped into my spirit. So, um, Joseph was his father's favorite, and when you're a parent, you're not supposed to have a favorite, but he had a favorite. So he gave him his colorful jacket, and that made the brothers jealous, okay? Because it was like a clear indication of his favoritism. So they were already upset about that. Okay, y'all. So I wanted to go ahead and throw this in here because I have a few different like children's Bibles that I read with my son. And so we'll like go start to finish from one, and then we'll switch to another one and another one. And they all have, like, of course, the stories, like the main stories of the Bible, but they all tell them a little bit differently, which I actually love because it breaks it down in an elementary way each time, but it's from a different person's perspective every time as well, if that makes sense. Like, it's still the story of the Bible, but they put their own spin on it and put it into their own words, I guess. Anyways, and so this one that I'm reading currently is the Mino Laugh and Grow Bible for Kids, written by Phil Vischer. It is the Gospel in 52 5-minute Bible stories. And this is definitely my favorite one. And so this is the one that we're reading right now. And tonight we just read the story of Joseph, and I was literally in that thing about to break down and cry several different times. I'm gonna go ahead and read it. Okay, so this is Joseph. It starts out, because Abraham trusted God. This is like spilling over from the previous story, which was about Abraham and Isaac, how he was sent up to sacrifice Isaac and that whole story. So, because Abraham trusted God, he became God's friend. Because Abraham's son Isaac trusted God, he became God's friend too. Then Isaac had a son named Jacob, who, you guessed it, learned from his father to trust God. And then Jacob had a son. And then Jacob had another son, and another, and another. Jacob had 12 sons in all. Their names were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Of all Jacob's sons, Joseph was his favorite. Jacob wanted Joseph to know that he was his dad's favorite, so he gave Joseph a special coat made of all the colors of the rainbow. This annoyed his older brothers. Why didn't they get special coats? To make matters worse, Joseph told his older brothers about dreams he was having. In his dreams, Joseph saw himself ruling over his brothers. He saw his brothers bowing down to him. Hearing about Joseph's dreams made his older brothers really annoyed and really jealous. So much so that they decided they'd be happier if Joseph wasn't around anymore. So one day when their dad wasn't with them, they picked Joseph up and threw him in a hole in the ground. They were just going to leave him there forever until they got another idea. Have you ever gotten so mad at your brother or sister that you wanted to sell them to the circus? Well, Joseph's brothers actually did, except not to the circus. They sold Joseph to some folks traveling to Egypt, who sold Joseph again when they got to Egypt.
Now Joseph had been thrown in a hole and sold twice. What a lousy week. In Egypt, Joseph worked for a very wealthy man. Joseph was honest and hardworking, and the wealthy man liked him. But the man's wife told a lie about him, and Joseph went to prison. Now Joseph had been thrown in a hole, sold twice, and sent to prison. Why would God let all that happen to Jacob's favorite son? Wasn't Jacob a friend of God? Joseph could have gotten mad and decided he didn't want to be God's friend anymore, but he didn't. He still prayed to God and he still tried hard to do the right thing. And God had a plan for Joseph. While in prison, Joseph told two of the men there the meaning of their crazy dream. God showed Joseph what the dreams meant. A few years later, Pharaoh, the king of all Egypt, also had a crazy dream. He'd heard about a guy named Joseph who could interpret dreams. Pharaoh called Joseph out of prison and told him the dream. Once again, God gave Joseph the meaning. The dream, Joseph said, was a warning. For 7 years, Egypt would grow lots and lots of food, more than they could eat. But then for 7 years after that, they would experience a famine. No food would grow at all. If the Egyptians didn't store up all the extra food during the first 7 years, they wouldn't have enough to eat during the famine, and many people would die. Pharaoh was so happy that he made Joseph the second most powerful person in Egypt and put him in charge of all the food. Joseph made sure they would have enough to eat when things got tough. When food stopped growing in Egypt, it also stopped growing where Joseph's family lived. They were really hungry, so hungry that they traveled all the way to Egypt to see if they could find food there. And sure enough, not only did they find plenty of food in Egypt, but they also found their brother Joseph. They thought Joseph would be mad at them, but he wasn't. Why wasn't Joseph mad? Because he could see God's plan. If Joseph hadn't been thrown in a hole, sold twice, and then sent to prison, Egypt would have run out of food and many people would have died. Joseph's family would have run out of food and they would have died. God used something very bad, the way his brothers treated him, to do something very good, to save Joseph's whole family. Joseph learned that God can use anything, no matter how bad, to do something good. And then it also goes through an everyday truth, which I will share. And it says, when I trust God, he uses the hard parts of my story for my good and for his glory. And then it has like a talk section. And the first question is, why wasn't Joseph mad at his brothers for selling him to be a slave in Egypt? And the second question is, what can God do with the bad things that happen to us? And then it also has a prayer. It says, dear God, we believe you can use our hard days to do something good. Help us to stay positive as we trust you. Amen. And like, the way that whole thing was for me in this season is crazy. Like, literally what I've been going through, like, I needed this probably more than anything. And a lot of times when I'm reading these stories to my son, sometimes it speaks to like something that's going on with him, but most of the time it's for me. So it'd be crazy. Basically, for me personally, I have been living out obedience is better than sacrifice. Learning the hard way though. And also pride comes before the fall. And I have just been learning the hard way. And the pride comes before the fall is because I thought I was living in obedience, and I was, but just partial obedience, which is still disobedience. And so still God is using the hard parts and the hard lessons that I'm having to learn. He's using them for my good. And this story or this video that I have been literally trying to get out for months now, it's for somebody, okay? And so I repent for taking this long to get on my Zoom, because lives are at stake, and like I'm not going to take these things so lightly, because it's not small to God, and it's very important, and it, you know, he cares about his kids. And so I have a word for somebody. I'm going to do everything that I can to get it out. I'm going to clear out storage. I'm going to, whatever I need to do, I need to get the word out when he gives it to me. Otherwise, he's just going to keep bringing it up until I do. So there's that. But yeah, I just had to get that off my chest. Now for this word. Can we just talk about how Jacob was the one that sent Joseph to check on his brothers? Like, that right there. It's not that he was in on, the plan. Of course, he loved, that was his favorite son. So it's not like he was out like plotting against him because of the dreams that he had. But it was all a part of God's plan. God needed to push Joseph into his destiny, into his purpose. And like part of that was literally Jacob sending Joseph to check on his brothers. God gave Joseph those dreams, and he knew that he would tell his family. He knew how it would make his brothers feel. He knew it would push them over the edge. He already had Joseph give him that coat. They were already jealous. And then he had those dreams on top of that. When he was checking on them, he came up and they said, "There goes that dreamer." So you already know how their heart was feeling towards him. And then on top of that, like for them to be right beside the well, they put him in the well and then they're sitting there trying to figure out what to do. He knew that they would be going through the process of trying to figure out, do we kill him? You know, like, what do we do? He knew that the traders would be coming by on those camels. Like, but he also knew that he was going to interpret the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. He knew the cupbearer was going to remember him. He was going to remember him at the right time. He was going to remember him at the appointed time, which was God's perfect timing. He knew he was going to restore the cupbearer to Pharaoh's side. And at the right time, Pharaoh was going to be looking for somebody to interpret his dream, and he was going to remember Joseph and remember that he interpreted his dream while he was in prison. And God is a God of detail. And even when it's uncomfortable, he's using that to test you and mold you and shape you and prune you and refine you and simultaneously get you to where you need to be and have you to meet the people that will be your destiny helpers. And he knows what he's doing. So I know this is not just for me, this is for somebody else too, which is why I'm on here sharing it. But at the right time, at the appointed time, God is going to have that person remember you. God is going to pull you up out of that pit and place you in the palace. It is all a part of the process. He would not have brought you this far just to bring you this far. I just pray that you would hold on to the fact that he knows every single detail of your story from beginning to end. And of course, he has plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope, a future, and an expected end. So everything that you're worried about right now, God has already made a way, and he's already figured it out. He's already seen how you're going to, get through that situation, and he's not worried about it. So instead of worrying about it, I would suggest you pray about it and give it to God and go to bed. Hopefully this was good to somebody else the way it was so good to me and so on time. That is all that I have for you guys right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Okay?
Bye.